The flirtation of Chamberlain's government started long before Hitler started to make claims on Czechoslovakia. In 1937, Field Marshal Goering, a Nazi chieftain, invited a senior cabinet minister, Lord Halifax, to an international hunting exhibition in Germany. Who was the hunter and who the hunted? The object for Halifax was to stress and tell Hitler that Britain would not use force to prevent him from accomplishing his goals in Eastern Europe, and that the British were honestly out to make friends with the Nazis. But as the politicians came and went, the British cameras preferred to show the black cat of Downing Street. Definitely it was helping the public image of number 10. What a kind household. Neville Chamberlain's foreign policy was to accommodate the dictators like Hitler and Mussolini. By overstepping his power as the Prime Minister and arranging deals behind Anthony Eden's back, he had progressively undercut Eden's authority. Eden, as the Foreign Secretary, disagreed with Chamberlain's policies and resigned in February 1938 because he was not prepared to agree to any concessions made to the Italians. Chamberlain could now open talks with Mussolini, who could help him fix Anglo-German relations. Clement Attlee, the Labour leader, was less pleased.
It will be said that this country has surrendered to the demands of a dictator. They are not prepared to stand for the League of Nations. They are not prepared to stand for democracy. They are prepared to make any kind of deal with the dictatorship powers. There will be no longer in this country a government which is prepared to stand up for international law and right, but a government that is prepared to enter into any kind of a deal with aggressive fascist powers. This policy is not a policy that will lead to peace. It will not lead to a settlement of the affairs of Europe. It is essentially a war policy, and it aligns this country with the reactionary forces of the world. The repercussions of this event will be widespread in the dominions, in the colonies, and throughout the world. It is most noticeable that everywhere the enemies of peace and democracy are rejoicing, the friends of this country are depressed.
On the 12th of March 1938, Hitler's armies strolled into the land of his birth, Austria, and proclaimed the Anschluss, or Union of the German-speaking peoples, abolishing the old frontiers. The camera recorded that the whole thing was completed without bloodshed and had showed only the rapturous joy and cheers. Yet, within hours, the prosecution of Jews, Democrats, and anti-Nazi opposition started. Surrounded on three sides by Nazi Germany, Czechoslovakia seemed likely to be the next item on the Godfather's shopping list. During a meeting between the French Premier, Daladier, his Foreign Minister, Bonnet, and the British, Chamberlain informed the French that Czechoslovakia could not be defended. That was the first step to undermine the Czech-French treaty. The public was told something else.
And we believe that useful results have been achieved by our visit to London.
A few days later, the Godfather sent his gymnastics instructor to Britain to pull the wool over the eyes of the British politicians.
Britain and France demonstrate the solidarity of the Anglo-French axis.
On the 20th of March 1938, Chamberlain wrote to his sister, "Nothing that France or we could do could possibly save the Czechs from being overrun by Germans. I have therefore abandoned any idea of giving a guarantee to Czechoslovakia or to the French in connection with her obligations to that country." Once Chamberlain had decided to sacrifice Czechoslovakia, he had employed all means of persuasion to break French military guarantees to the Czechs. So it was that the British and French performed an uneasy diplomatic quadrille.
Well, in the first place, America has imported the Lambeth Walk. London has sent a dance to New York.
The rest of the world, unaware of the diplomatic machinations, preferred singing, dancing, and enjoying themselves if they could afford it.
It's not altogether the Lambeth Walk as I know it, and I've been in some crushes this summer, but the girls, being as quick on the uptake as they are easy to look at, Lupino Lane won't mind. Even the onlookers begin to catch on. And so me and my girls step out in New York doing the Lambeth Walk.
The Nazis preferred the dance rhythm of the goose step. The Americans could enjoy prettier parades, caring even less about what was going on in Europe.
I think the United States played two unfortunate roles in the whole crisis brought about by Munich. First, because Roosevelt couldn't be as strong-minded in arguing with England standing against Hitler, because he knew how divided the American people were. He allowed a lot of ambiguity in his policy to stand. And as a result, it was possible for Chamberlain to listen to Joe Kennedy, who had a very different point of view from President Roosevelt, and assume that Joe Kennedy was really speaking for America in backing him 100% on appeasing Hitler and allowing Munich to go forward.
Joe Kennedy, the successful businessman and film producer, was prepared to hum along to the strains of Chamberlain's deals as the new American ambassador and made it clear what his policy was.
I think it's important to remember that Kennedy was appointed ambassador to the Court of St. James because he had been a successful businessman. He had contributed to Roosevelt's campaign in 1932, and then Roosevelt appointed him the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission after the stock market crash. He did a surprisingly good job there, and then the next leap was made to appoint him ambassador to the Court of St. James. Unfortunately, he brought with him to that position this narrow businessman's outlook, which had been incredibly successful in America and in the business world, but was the last thing we needed on the brink of World War II. We needed somebody in that position who could have a breadth of vision and understand what we were up against with Hitler, something that history had never really quite seen before. It was that historical understanding and that vision that he didn't really have. Indeed, even when he got to Europe and he became ambassador, he allied himself with Chamberlain because they shared that businessman's outlook. And even after Munich, and even after the failure of Munich, and even after Czechoslovakia was occupied by Hitler in March of 1939, even then Kennedy was still meeting with various businessmen, heads of corporations worldwide, with the German finance minister in hopes that they could still bring about peace with Hitler somehow, so as not to disrupt these normal business relationships. That was the sad thing. Roosevelt made a terrible decision to appoint this man because we needed somebody just the opposite during that time.